Welcome, friends, to the Overcomers Initiative podcast. I'm your host, Phil King. I'm glad that you've decided to join us for this episode today. I'm recording this episode on Easter Sunday afternoon, so from the Overcomers Initiative to you and to your family, happy Easter, happy Resurrection Sunday. And I rejoice with all those that watch who are believers in the finishing of our atonement through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so, happy Easter. I'm excited to get going today. Today we're going to be dealing with a subject that is a little bit touchy. It can be a little bit discouraging, and that is, if you've read the title, The Relapse. How do we handle the relapse? Should I expect a relapse? Am I a failure if I relapse? All these things, we're going to cover them. Let me say first and foremost, we need to, before we go any further, I'm going to try to get you to look at the relapse in a different way. The default for looking at relapsing is to think of it as I was doing so well and then I failed. I really suck. Can I even really do this? All these things, and we use a relapse as a avenue to really kind of look down on ourselves and really just kind of beat ourselves up. I want to maybe shift that a little bit. Obviously, a relapse is not a good thing. We don't want to relapse. But if you're going to follow this plan, and I'll rehash the plan here in a second, just for those who are, if maybe this is your first episode, I came up with this little plan. I tried it. It worked for me. So maybe it'll work for you. So if you're going to follow this plan, the first few weeks of being on this plan, you're probably going to relapse a whole lot. And this plan, what the plan is you're going to put covenant eyes on all of your devices. Your phone especially, you're going to set it up as a brick phone, ideally. No games, no YouTube, no Facebook, no Instagram, no Snapchat, no Reddit, no nothing of that. All that you can do on your phone is make calls and send texts. That's pretty much it. If you're gonna go full throttle on this, there are some things you can do to maybe get the same protection and not have to go so drastically far. We'll get into that later. But if you're going full hog, nothing on your phone, you can send texts and make calls with your phone. That's it. Nothing fun on your phone. Your computer has covenant eyes. And from there, we're going to follow the principles that Jesus set out in Matthew 5:28 and 29, where he says, if your eye offends you, pluck it out. If your hand offends you, cut it off. Again, Jesus, I don't believe, is literally telling people to chop off their hands and pluck out their eyes and physically maim themselves like that. But the idea and the principle of radical amputation of anything that would hinder you and offend you in your Christian walk needs to go. And it needs to go yesterday. So following that principle, this is where we're going to get into the relapses. Maybe you set up your phone and it's not totally a brick phone and you find ways to skirt covenant eyes and do all these things through these other apps that can get you onto the internet. All right, well, you figure that out and you're going to cut that off. For me, I had an Xbox. I could get onto the web through the Xbox, so I put the Xbox up. Streaming apps, we had a Roku. I could get to porn stuff I shouldn't be watching through movies, YouTube on the streaming app. So I took our TV down and I gave our Roku stick to my brother and sister-in-law for a while. Do what you got to do to sever all your ability to access porn. And the reason for that is you will need at least a month. I say give it 3 months for your brain to rewire, because the more you watch porn, those neural pathways, the reason you watch porn is because your brain wants dopamine. Porn, especially linked with masturbation and orgasm, gives you a hit of dopamine that's very much similar to drugs, like cocaine and meth. Your brain wants that hit of dopamine, so it knows it can get dopamine watching porn, And the more you do that, the more you just plow that neural pathway down to the point where your decision making process in your prefrontal cortex completely gets taken out of the picture. And now you don't even think about it. Your brain wants dopamine. It knows it can get dopamine from porn. It doesn't even ask your brain if this is a good idea. It just goes to it. So we want to starve that access to porn. So we're forced to look for dopamine elsewhere, and our brain begins to rewire itself, give new, healthier neural pathways. Our prefrontal cortex gets back involved in the decision-making process so we can make intelligent, right decisions. Throughout all of this, especially the first little bit, I don't care how thorough you are in eliminating possible sources for porn, you're not going to eliminate everything right off the get-go. It was true for me. It'll be true for you unless you just say no to technology, period. And if you can do that, God bless you. I wish I could do that. I'm so darn linked to everything in the internet. It's ridiculous and I hate it, but that's the way we are now. So you're going to go through a season where your brain kind of goes into what I call crackhead mode. You know, you see the guys like, hey man, you got any of the, they have to go on side quests, as the comedians would say. They got to go on a side quest and pull copper out of AC units and stuff. Well, your brain's going to go through that. Your brain's going to sit there shaking and scratching and be like, hey, I need to get my fix. And it's going to start thinking of ways, okay, well, I know I can get to this thing from here at this app, and then I can go from there. And like, it's crazy what your brain will think up when it's desperate for a porn fix. And so there's going to come a time where your brain figures out something and somehow to get to porn, and you're going to say, oh no, that's I can't do that, and you're going to back out. But then later that's just going to itch, knowing that you can get there. That's just going to itch, and it's going to itch, and it's going to itch, and eventually, unless you cut it off right at the pass, you're going to relapse. So this is what this episode is dealing with today, is just what to do after the relapse, because we're going to relapse. I should say before we go any further, most of the information that I got today has come from the Covenant Eyes partner app, companion app, I guess they call it. It's called Victory. If you have Covenant Eyes, if you want Covenant Eyes, most of their account management is moving towards the Victory app. So all of your accountability reports will go there. But then they also have a bunch of resources and videos and articles and stuff to read, to research, to help you understand the science behind a porn addiction, steps to take, things to consider as you're in your journey towards victory and overcoming. And they have this article on the relapse and what to do when you relapse. So this is mostly that's mostly where I'm getting my information from. So there you go. I put a little bit of a spin on it, so I'm not just reading from the PowerPoint, if you would. But the first thing that's important to do is see the relapse as a tool, not really as a drawback, and understand that it's going to happen. You're going to have a relapse. That's just... Now, before we go any further with that, if you're a believer and you're a child of God, a relapse is really going to hurt, because you're going to be like, oh, man, I've sinned. I've done this terrible thing. And there's going to be this rush of shame and guilt. You need to understand God does not look at you any differently. Understand that sin that you've just sinned has already been taken care of. Go to Him, acknowledge that sin, ask for forgiveness, repent, and move forward. And we're going to show you some steps to take in the immediate aftermath of the relapse in order to move forward. So we're going to investigate and we're going to learn from this relapse. So the first step is you need to set things right. Again, if you're a believer, you're going to have this rush of guilt. Go to the Lord, repent, beg forgiveness, and move forward. If you are married, go to your spouse. Admit what happened. Tell them what happened. My spouse, my wife, has been very understanding with this. Never really holds it over my head. She's gotten annoyed at times, understandably so. I would be too. But go to your spouse, and you if you're married, you need them in your corner, by the way. create that healthy relationship. You need them in your corner. You need them as an accountability partner, because if you can't trust your spouse, who can you trust other than the Lord? Safe answer, God. You can trust God. That's the safe answer. But if you can't trust your spouse in this thing, you're really setting yourself up for failure. So go to your spouse, admit what you've done, beg forgiveness from them. If you're not married, go to your mentor, your accountability partner, your parent, whoever it is that's holding you accountable. Go to them, ask for forgiveness, and talk it out with them, and then begin some introspection. The second is don't binge. There's a tendency, especially if it's been a while since your last relapse, where you'll be like, man, I done messed up. Well, we're already here, so we may as well just get it while the getting's good, I guess you could say, which is wrong. Don't binge. What'll happen when you binge is you'll just start going and going and going and going and going, and before you know it, you've looked at things, you've seen things that you never would have dreamed about looking and finding, and now you feel even worse than you did than just having the relapse. So don't binge. Resist that urge, resist that temptation. Don't binge. Shut it down and walk away in the immediate aftermath. Number 3 is commit to an investigation. You need to understand that we have to learn from our mistakes. Proverbs 24:16 says, "For a just man falleth 7 times and rises again." It doesn't matter how many times you fall. Understand you will fall. You still live in this flesh. You're still sinful. You're going to fall. Pick yourself back up and move forward with the grace, with the knowledge of the grace of God. Just keep going. If you fall and you stay falling, well, you're not much good. A just man falls 7 times and keeps getting back up. Doesn't matter how many times he fails. He's going to keep at it. He's going to keep trying. You need to have that mindset. So first off, in this investigation is identify and remove your source of porn. This is the easiest part of this whole investigation. If you were able to find porn through this app, well, get rid of the app. You don't need the app. If you're able to find porn through your Roku, get rid of your Roku. Whatever it was, whatever you did, either block websites, get rid of apps, do whatever you need to do, throw away the machine in order to cut off that source of porn. Because your brain will remember that you found porn through this thing, and if you don't get rid of it, it's going to keep going back and keep going back and keep going back. And that's not good. That's not what we're trying to do here. So you need to cut that source off at the head. There's a bunch of sources we don't immediately consider. Again, there's a bunch of apps. It seems like every app in the world has some sort of mechanism to getting onto the internet through various different ways. Games, they'll have ads, and it's ridiculous. They'll have links to their social media. There was one game, I really liked this game, and I had to get rid of it because they had a link to it was a Russian social media thing that I just, out of curiosity, checked out, and then temptation took over, and I was able to get porn on that, and I was like, well, dadgummit, now I got to get rid of this game that I really like. But I got rid of the game because I knew that if I did not, well, now I can't get onto that. Now, we'll go into this a little bit, into some more detail on some steps you can take to still maintain a little bit of some freedom with what you have on your phone, but still not allowing pornography. But we'll get into that in just a second. But first step is just get rid of their source. However you need to do that, get rid of the source of your porn, or you're just going to keep going back to it. Next, you need to do a little bit of some psychoanalyzation on yourself. There's your $5 word for the day. Do some self-introspection. And this is a step that a lot of people, I think, ignore. But it's a very, very important step because there was a lot of factors that went in, most likely, to you falling to this temptation here. You got to do some soul searching to get an idea of how you were feeling physically, emotionally, spiritually. Were you feeling, as far as physically goes, were you tired? Were you hungry? Were you sick? Uh, your emotions, were you stressed? Were you angry? Were you lonely? Were you sad? Our spiritual sense of well-being, do we feel like the heavens are brass and God's just got his thumb on us and we just feel so alone and depressed, and all these things add up, and before you know it, we're in this head space and heart space where we fall at the slightest little nudge from the devil, and we don't want that. So we need to figure out how are we feeling, so later if we start feeling that way again, we can begin to walk a little bit more carefully and understand that, hey, I'm pretty vulnerable right now. A good way to do this is perform a recap of your day and identify some possible hidden triggers. I mean, if you think of a day where you went to sleep late, you had to get up early for work, you didn't really sleep that great while you were sleeping, you and your wife or your parents or whoever had a big fight the last night, and now you got to go into work or school, and your boss is just on your case, won't leave you alone. If you're at school, maybe you bombed a test, all these other things, and then you sit down at lunch or whatever, and you just want to play this stupid little game on your phone, and then they have one of those choose your own destiny apps, and it's always like ads that show up, and it's always super sensual. And by the way, it's a total misrepresentation of that stupid game, but they're always super sensual. And now that triggers on, you're like, man, now your brain's thinking about that, and your brain's like, oh, I feel really, really crummy right now. I know. And so you're sitting on your phone anyway, so you start browsing around some things, you start finding some ways around stuff, and before you know it, boom, you've had a relapse. Let's look deeper into our relapses, and that can give us a little bit better insight as to when we're more vulnerable to temptation. Right? If you wake up and you're cranky and you're tired, just pause, take a step back and think, all right, I'm cranky, I'm tired. I know from past experience that because I was cranky and tired, I was a little bit more vulnerable to temptation. So maybe I'm just gonna take 5 seconds and really pray and really ask God to help me today, because I know that I'm gonna be fairly vulnerable. If you're hungry, go eat something. A big one for me is just not doing anything. I'll be home alone. There won't really be anything to do. And I'll just be sitting on my phone playing these stupid games. And the idle mind is the devil's workshop, right? So don't be idle. That's a big one for me, is just do something. Go clean the bathroom. Go clean up the yard. Go do something. Anything to get you off of your butt and moving around and focused on some sort of task. Because the minute you're idle and you're not thinking about anything, well, your mind begins to wander, and it starts, because we're sinful and fleshly and you already have a proclivity to this, you're going to start focusing on more sensual things, and it moves from sensual to sexual things, and then now you've relapsed and now you feel crummy. So don't be idle. Pay attention to how you're feeling physically. Are you tired? When you start getting these thoughts for temptation, just take a step. A good thing that Victory recommended was just take 2 seconds and look for and name just 5 things in your space. Like, so I got a lamp right here, I got a hat, I got my computer in front of me, a guitar case, a calendar, windows. And that brings you out of your head and back into your surroundings. And so it kind of breaks that train of thought. And then really think, okay, I'm having these tempting thoughts. So let's look at how I'm feeling right now. Am I lonely? No, I am a little bit bored. I think I'm a little bit hungry. And I could use a nap. Well, go make yourself a sandwich. Take a nap. And you'll be amazed how much better you feel afterwards. And then you've avoided a relapse because you walked circumspectly, you walked with your eyes open, and saw the signs, understood where you were because you've investigated past relapses. And now you know, okay, this is where I'm at. These are the steps I need to take to avoid this relapse. By understanding what conditions make us vulnerable to tempting, we can walk more circumspectly, and you'll find that in Ephesians 5:15 and 1 Peter 5:8. So that's how we deal with the relapse. Just as a quick aside, I said I would go back and talk about some things you can do on your phone to maybe, if you need to have access to things on your phone, well, there are some things you can do. If you have to have apps, if you have to have this, and I understand a big one for me is Google Maps, because you can, or Apple Maps, because they allow you to look at certain places' websites, and from the websites, it could be a bad website you could get to. It could be the website of a wicked establishment. You could move from a website to some other search engine, and there's so many different ways you can use Google and Apple Maps to access things that you shouldn't. So for me, I just got rid of Google Maps. Now, I know that it's important to be able to get where you're going, and most of us, especially if it's outside of our immediate area or one little route we take to work and to church and to school, if it's outside of that, we usually like to have some sort of navigation. Now, I was prior law enforcement, so one thing that I already had at my disposal was a little Garmin GPS. And I had it so I could see what the roads were around me and where certain roads went. So if somebody decided they were going to dip out from me when I wanted to stop them, I could be like, all right, well, this road goes back over here. We'll just sit here. It told me the names of the roads. Once I got out of that and I moved back to where I'm at now, well, Google Maps started being an issue, but I already had this Garmin, so we just started using the Garmin for navigation. From there, it moved, because I broke it. It moved. There's this app. It's called Here We Go. It's a offline map, so you can download the area of your area. It'll still use cell data to get you where you need to go with some pretty good accuracy. It's better than Apple Maps. Apple Maps doesn't take you anywhere. I don't know why anybody uses Apple Maps. But Here We Go doesn't. It literally just tells you like where you're trying to go, what hours they have. So if I'm trying to go to Best Buy, it'll tell me where the Best Buy is, how to get to the Best Buy, what time they're open, what time they close. And I think it has a little link to maybe TripAdvisor. It might. Some of them do, some of them don't. But that's been a big help to me because it doesn't let me go to the internet, which is a big plus for me. Another thing is consider switching to an Apple device. Now, I'm not an Apple fanboy. I am really not appreciative of Apple at all. I think if I have to spend $50 to buy a little dongle to do something that I should already have been able to do, that I know I can do with this other Android phone, I'm not a fan of that. So I'm not an Apple fan. But Apple does have a very user-friendly interface. It's very intuitive. Setting up parental controls, blocking certain websites is much, much easier on an Apple device as opposed to an Android device. I'm sure you can do that with an Android device. I'm not sure how you go about that. I tried, and it didn't work out, so I switched back to an Apple. But you can go into your content, your screen time, go into your content restrictions, and under web content, you can block certain sites and allow others. So if you are in a position to where, say, you need to have an email app on your phone for work or whatever, well, if you're able to use that app as a way to get to porn through like Twitter, I know a big one for me was I was able to get onto Twitter through other apps because they'd have their social media whatever listed. So the app wasn't really the problem, it was Twitter. So I just was able to go into the content settings on my Apple device and just straight up block Twitter. I blocked Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, all the big ones, and then some other specific sites that just I was able to find. So I have a list of blocked websites, but I can still use all these other apps without fear. So now if that's just another option if you have to have these apps. Now again, I'm going to recommend that you set up your phone as a brick phone. So calls and texts only. I understand that's very difficult to do. I understand that might be impossible. for some people. So that's why I'm giving you these other options. But once you get past the 3-month mark, you're probably going to want to add some, have some fun things on your phone. So keep this in mind. You can always, if you have an Apple device, just block certain sites. And it's a great way to maintain your accountability. And then if you have Covenant Eyes on an Android, you really don't have to worry because it screenshots everything. But with Apple, it only screenshots through Safari. So a big thing for me was, well, let's just, as much as we can, let's keep everything web-based. So I can get onto my Gmail through Safari. And so now there's no way that I can go into another website without Covenant Eyes having an issue with that, because it's watching everything that I'm doing, and it's just another check for me. So those are some steps that you can take to mitigate as you're having these relapses, as you're moving forward. Remember, identify your source of porn that you just had, cut it off, whether it's through your content settings and just blocking the websites, or just getting rid of apps entirely, getting rid of computers, getting rid of TVs, getting rid of Xboxes, game systems, whatever you need to do to block yourself from having access to that porn. You need to do it. You need to do it. And I understand that's a tall order, that's a tough demand. But remember, Jesus likened this stuff to cutting off your hand and plucking out your eye. If you think taking a TV down for a while is hard, try cutting out your eye. So it's probably not that hard. At least for a time. And trust me, you'll be a lot more productive when you do that. So identify your source of porn, get rid of that, do some introspection, try to figure out where you were physically, emotionally, spiritually. Where were you? How did you feel? Do some psychoanalysis on yourself, and try to remember and do a recap of your day. What led up to you being in that headspace? So the next time you'll be able to identify, okay, I'm getting to a point where I'm very vulnerable to this. So I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to reach out to my accountability partner. I'm going to pray. I'm going to read my Bible. I'm going to go do push-ups and just try to get my mind off of something and do something else. This is how we deal with the relapse. Real quick, I'm going to end with this. That's how we deal with the relapse. If you are listening to this podcast and you would like the protection of Covenant Eyes, but at this point you can't really afford it, Covenant Eyes allows unlimited devices per account. So what I will do for you, because it's Easter, is if you are watching and you're listening and you would like Covenant Eyes on your device, but you can't really pay for it, reach out to me. You can DM me on Facebook. You can email me. You can comment if you're watching via YouTube. And I will get in touch with you. I'll send you the info so you can get onto my account. I'll be your accountability partner, and you'll have that protection on your device. If you would like it, that is my gift to you for this Easter. Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Again, happy Easter, happy Resurrection Sunday. I will see you guys again next month. Until then, God bless you. Keep fighting for that victory.